Welcome to Business Law Unlocked with attorney Shannon A. Holmes.
Hey everybody, welcome to an all-new episode of Business Law Unlocked with attorney Shannon A. Holmes. I'm your host, Mike Leon. Shannon's a seasoned attorney with a broad range of experience in all facets of business and sports law, and he's equally versed in asset preservation and wealth transfer, and serves as general counsel for serial entrepreneurs out there. Today's episode, we're covering the essential legal steps to start and grow your business. Shannon, good to see you as always. Let's get into this. Let's talk about high level. What are the first steps an entrepreneur should take when starting a new business?
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Again, I think obviously concept and idea are critical in determining what direction an entrepreneur wants to go. But I love to always say that don't leave the legal team out. Make sure you include legal when you're making that investment with your time and resources into your idea. Obviously, the goal here is to create an idea or business that's going to return some dollars to you. And so be sure to make that investment with the legal counsel so that we can help you strategize and putting that legal wrapping around what your concepts are.
Shannon, the common terms out there, they get some confusion from folks starting a business. You get LLC, you get the S Corps, you get the partnerships. Can you kind of explain these different types of business structures? And how should that person listening to this episode, watching this episode right now, how should they choose the right one?
Mike, I love it. I love your line of questioning. So those are the things people really want to hear about, right? Really need to know about. LLC, limited liability company. My home office is in Dallas, Texas. So in Texas, that's one of the structures a lot of entrepreneurs use. It gives you the ability to have the necessary protection to protect your personal assets, right? So once you enter into a limited liability company, it's its own entity, right? So if your business is run by a limited liability company, the only thing at stake, if something were to happen with that business, for instance, if you were to have a judgment or a lawsuit, et cetera, and if everything else is done properly, and we don't have time to go into all those details, but if everything else is done properly with respect to how you're running your business, then the only thing at stake in that lawsuit / judgment are the assets of that business, not your personal assets. And that's the biggest thing, Mike. I always try to share with clients, potential clients, you want to make sure that the business is one entity and you as a person is a different entity. If I could, Mike, I'd love to give you a quick example.
Yep.
Oftentimes I share with entrepreneurs and my clients, when you have an LLC, when you've created that business, the only thing you're doing with that money for that business is running that business, right? You can't take that LLC credit card or debit card and then go to the grocery store and buy your personal groceries. Now you've just crossed your personal life into your limited liability company life, and you've now effectively put yourself in a position where that LLC could be breached in the event of a lawsuit or some type of other action against your company. So just those simple things. When you have a business, you have to run it just like a business. Everything only for the business is run through that LLC. And then you pay yourself, Mike, accordingly. You pay yourself like any other business would. You pay yourself, and then you take your earnings, and then you go to the grocery store and buy your groceries. So those are just some of the simple things when it comes to running an LLC, or if you, as you mentioned, if you're setting up a corporation. A corporation gives you the same protections as LLC, has a few more guardrails with it, a few more requirements per the state for making sure that corporation is properly run, But again, it separates your personal assets from your business assets.
Shannon, I'm sure keeping documentation, records retention is really important. Can you kind of take people inside why are governing documents like, bylaws or operating agreements, why are they important for a new business?
Great question. Yeah, they're super important, again, because those documents determine how your business is going to be run, right? They are like the U.S. Constitution, right? They are like any other governing document for any other organization you're part of. That determines how you're going to run the company. For instance, you've got multiple members of a corporation, shareholders, multiple members of an LLC, and you're trying to determine how to take an action. You go back to your bylaws, to your operating agreement that will then determine how you should move in that space. One of the other things that we often talk about and preach to our clients is succession. We assume that when we start a business, everything's going to go well, but oftentimes a couple things can happen. One, someone decides they want out. How do we address that? That's determined by your bylaws and or your operating agreement. Thirdly, what happens should there be an untimely death of one of the shareholders, key shareholders, Or in the case of an LLC, one of the key members. How do we address that? That's in your operating agreement. That's in your bylaws. And if we have that properly drafted, then we can easily go to those documents to determine how to move. And then the other thing I always point out, Mike, what if there's a dispute? What if there are a couple of members of an LLC and your governing documents speak to it and says, hey, you have to have a majority? What if you can't get a majority? What if your governing documents don't speak to it? What do we do then? So that's why it's so critical to have those documents drafted, properly drafted, and a part of your business organization.
Shannon, I'm glad you touched on some of these key elements that they should include in their bylaws and these governing documents, these entrepreneurs when they're starting these businesses. But let me ask you to further expand some of the things in terms of disputing resolutions, like what mechanisms should they have in these governing documents, or what should they be incorporating in these government documents to protect themselves?
Right. Well, again, want to make sure that when we draft the governing documents that it talks about if there is a dispute, how do we handle it, right? For instance, if you've got two members, two best buddies, they form a company, and in their governing documents, they say, hey, for us to decide on selling a major asset, it has to be by majority. Well, for majority with a two-member organization means both have to agree. What if those two guys can't agree? What do we do then? Well, oftentimes we'll write into a two-member organization, hey, you can then go out and find a third party. Oftentimes, the two people will agree the third party may be Mr. Mike. We really value Mr. Mike's opinion. We want to have Mr. Mike to be our mediator in the event that we can't decide. What Mr. Mike says will be the defining decision for the organization. Or we may say, hey, we'll go out and find a third party mediator who will then provide a binding decision. In other instances, we may say, hey, we'll go to the American Arbitration Association, who has a list of mediators and arbitrators who could then provide their service to us to help us make a decision that will be binding for the company. All of these steps in an effort, Mike, to avoid going through the very expensive process of litigation.
I am non-biased and available for people out there listening. So, Shannon, let me ask you, for people listening that are starting a business, how important is it? I mean, obviously, this sounds like a Captain Obvious question, but how important is it for them to comply with local, state, federal regulations just from the onset of starting this business?
Oh, my gosh, that's a huge question. It's critically important, right? I think understanding your business, understanding what's required is critical. But oftentimes, legal counsel can help you answer some of those questions and or provide you some information you just weren't aware of. Oftentimes, we represent clients who are in the restaurant or bar space or dealing with alcohol. And in Texas specifically, there's some very, very detailed laws regarding where you can have hold an alcohol license. How do you hold an alcohol license? How far do you have to be from a school, from a church? Those types of things. I mean, and if you get into anything dealing with environmental businesses, they have very, very defined rules and regulations that have to be addressed. In some cities, there's zoning laws. So when you're talking about buying a piece of property you think you're going to build a 20-unit apartment complex, well, it may not be zoned for that. So how do you address that? But it's very critical when starting any business that you're very clear about local, whether it's city, then you go to the county, then state, and then obviously federal regulations. Those things are critical to understanding before you expend too many resources to get into that business.
Shannon, as a business grows, in your years of seeing this, what legal considerations should these owners keep in mind as the business continues to expand and grow?
Oh, great question. We want to see everyone grow. Obviously, it starts with human capital, right? Making sure that their employee documents are up to par, making sure they're developing their documents to govern how they handle their employees. So whether it's human resources or just employee manuals and handbooks, that's critical. Risk management. As the business grows, your risks are going to grow. So are you properly insured? Are you properly structured as an entity to insure against any risk that may come up? And then obviously compliance. Are you in compliance as an entity? Are you in compliance as we just talked about with respect to regulations? Have you entered into other areas of business that now have new regulations? As we know, every year Congress is passing new legislation at the federal level, oftentimes at the state level, and some of that legislation is enacted at different times of the year, whether it's January 1st, sometimes it's September 1st. So are you keeping up with that in the respective industries that you're participating in?
Shannon, I heard a bunch of phrases there, but I didn't hear IP, which is intellectual property. How can business owners protect their intellectual property as they scale their operations?
Mike, you just saved me. You just threw me a lifeline. I appreciate it. Intellectual property is critical, especially in this new day and age of technology and where we are. It's so easy to get our hands on IP, whether it's someone's logo or trademark or copyright. Those things are critical, right? They're just as critical as when you add your legal team to the onset of you starting your business or growing your business. You want to make sure that legal counsel is considering the intellectual property and you're spending the money to protect what you've created. Every day we're seeing intellectual property fights in all fronts. Part of a lawsuit now where we just filed a lawsuit, a team of lawyers and we just filed a lawsuit against Amazon for the improper use of our client's name, his image, and his likeness in a movie that they produced. And so it's critically important to make sure you're protecting your IP and make sure that's a part of your list as you go to start your business, that you're investing and budgeting to make sure you're trademarking your logos and copywriting the materials you need to copyright.
We've talked about all the things that are important to business owners. Let's land the plane here, Shannon, as we always do. What importance would you say business owners should place on keeping legal counsel like yourself throughout the life of the company?
From my vantage point, it's number one, right? I don't think there's anyone more important other than your CPA and your banker. I think you have to be lock and step with your legal counsel, some type of CPA assistance, and your banker, especially if you have an emerging and growing business. There are just so many things that are happening, especially if your business is growing and emerging and growing into that business that you dreamed of. Because as I said before, there are things that are ever changing. And I just want to reflect quickly. I left one thing out, Mike, and I want to make sure the audience hears this, and that's patents. Oftentimes we've got entrepreneurs who are creating really unique ideas, and we want to make sure that technology is patented properly so that no one can infringe upon that. But those are the types of things when you have legal counsel and you can pick up the phone and call them and talk about these things, and they can provide that readily available assistance that you need to protect your business.
It's important. Shannon, we can't thank you enough for all the insights and analysis on all this. We truly appreciate it, as always.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I really appreciate you.
And thank you, everybody out there, for listening to another episode of Business Law Unlocked with attorney Shannon A. Holmes. If you're ready to take that next step in growing your business, Shannon can provide that legal support that he just told you you're going to need. So visit ShannonAHolmes.com. Don't forget to leave a review, comment, subscribe to this episode, or share it with somebody who needs this advice. As always, I'm Mike Leon. We'll see everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.